Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I just finished this amazing interview with a guest who is an expert in functional nutrition, functional medicine. It's really the new approach to bringing the holistic and the science together. And we had such an amazing conversation. I know you're going to love it. What I wanted to do and mix things up instead of have my regular commercial, I wanted to let you know that if you love my podcast, there's two ways that you can support this movement. And the first way is to share. Take an episode that has really made a difference to you and share it with a loved one. Take it and share it to all your loved ones. Email, Facebook, text. In person. I have actually have listeners who've sat with their friends and played episodes for them. It makes for great discussion. Please share this information so that we can continue to help more people. And if you also want to support the podcast in a monetary sense, I'd love for you to go to takeyoursupplements.com. I absolutely 100% am behind them. They're amazing. They will for free coach you and talk to you and help you month after month with your supplements. They'll help you order the right supplements for you. You end up getting on auto ship, get free shipping. They have a 100% guaranteed return policy, so you can get your money back. If you don't see any results in 30 days, you can just get your money back. And I personally know all of them that answer the phones there, the health coaches, the supplement coaches that help people. They're really amazing people with huge hearts, and they are so knowledgeable. They've been studying with naturopaths. They're so knowledgeable about supplements. And what they can do is they can make sure that you're taking the right multivitamin, you're taking the right multimineral, you're taking the right vitamin D, just all the things that generally everyone needs for good health. And then they have additional support, reversing blood sugar issues, high blood pressure issues, hormonal problems. So many problems can be corrected through food and nutrition. They'll also coach you on your food as well. So I highly recommend going to takeyoursupplements.com. If you're going to buy supplements anyway, buy them from a place that is reputable and has just an amazing, amazing amount of service and amazing amount of care and high quality supplements for a really, really good price. And know that when you buy from them, you're also supporting the Learn True Health podcast. This is listener supported. We're doing these great interviews and getting this information out to as many people to help as many people as possible, completely supported by you, the listener. So thank you for sharing this podcast, and thank you so much for going to takeyoursupplements.com, talking to the health coaches and seeing what kind of supplements are right for you. I've been personally taking their supplements for 6 years, and so is my husband. And I have reversed my high blood pressure, reversed my type 2 diabetes. I just got back from the doctor actually recently and got my A1C hemoglobin tested, and she gave me 2 gold stars. I mean, she was just like beside herself how great it was. I have got more energy than I have ever had in my life, and that all started when I started on their something as simple as multi-mineral. It's a $24 bottle, and it's a liquid multi-mineral. And I started on that, and then I felt such a big difference that I kept adding, making sure I got a great multivitamin, making sure that I had all the other herbs and amino acids and fatty acids and all the things I wanted to make sure that I had a well-rounded supplement program. But the biggest thing is that I have seen results and I feel results with their supplements. I've been taking supplements for years, my entire life, even when I was a kid. And it's only a few amount of brands have I actually felt a difference, felt more energy, felt more mental clarity. I even reversed my acid reflux with their digestive enzymes. So what I'm saying is that if you want to get results and you're interested in taking supplements, or you already take supplements, try theirs because they get results and you'd be supporting the podcast. And I'd only ever recommend something that I 100% believe in and that I can get behind and that I know will make a difference in your life. Thank you so much for sharing the podcast and enjoy today's episode. It was really thrilling and it's packed full of amazing information that is going to help transform your health and your life. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 172. We're in for a really big treat today. We have with us an amazing expert in health, and functional nutrition is something that is, I think, so new to the scene, or at least we're kind of just learning about it really, or just hearing about it maybe for the first time. Maybe you've heard this phrase been thrown around a few times, but really today we're going to dive into why functional nutrition is so important. And one of the leading experts in functional nutrition is with us today, Josh Gitalis. I'm so excited to have you here. In fact, you lead courses where you teach naturopathic physicians functional nutrition?
Yes, absolutely. We have a full functional nutrition certification program, and not just for naturopaths, but we have personal trainers, nurses, pharmacists, health enthusiasts, health practitioners from all sorts of places come join us to learn about it, and people just really wanting to take their health to the next level.
Very cool. Well, you gave me a list of things we could talk about today. And, I know I could have you here for hours and hours. You can teach us about sleep, about exercise, about obviously nutrition. But you mentioned something, processing stress. And I think that is so important and so underutilized as one of the tools that we should really tap into to optimize our health. I'd love for us to dive into that topic today. But first, I really would love for you to share your story and let us know more about what led you to become this expert that you are today.
Great place to start. So, years ago, I did my degree at university in kinesiology, and spent about 4 years working on that one, and looked and explored many different aspects of health. I did sports injuries. I worked on the school football team as part of the sports medicine crew. I was interested in the history of the Olympics. I was interested in nutrition. I was interested in so many different areas, but nothing really in terms of careers afterwards encapsulated all of my interests. Um, so I decided to search and to look. And at first I took a year off and played a little bit in the mountains, climbing and skiing and doing some of my favorite activities. Then I realized it was time to, buckle down and figure out what I wanted to do. So I was working as a health coach for a while and then a personal trainer. And I realized that, people who were interested in working out weren't that interested in working in for the most part. And I realized that if people really wanted to be healthy, they had to start from the inside out. So I did keep on searching, and I ended up going to this conference where there was a speaker there who spoke about holistic nutrition and nutrition from the dirt up. And one of the things he said is that if you don't understand soil health, you don't understand anything about health, about human health, about nutrition, about anything. And that sort of inspired me, and that lecture inspired me to look into holistic nutrition. I was just like blown away by the information and realized that I hadn't been introduced to any of that type of information in any of my studies in my 4-year degree. So that's kind of set me on the path. Shortly thereafter, I enrolled in nutrition school, got my diploma. And then afterwards, I began practicing right away and always sought the most advanced and up-to-date clinical information. I was always looking for the bits and pieces that would make a difference working with real human beings. Not just the stuff that we learn in the textbooks and journals and studies and things like that, or, webinars, seminars. I don't even think there were webinars back then. But the stuff that actually worked and was important information for having this conversation with my clients in the clinic. And I ended up sort of learning about the field of functional medicine and also functional nutrition, and began studying intensely in those areas while concurrently practicing, working with real people. And I also, through that time, taught at two colleges, the nutrition school I went to and the Ontario College of Homeopathic Medicine here in Toronto. And, that brings us to today, where I spend Part of my time in my clinical practice, I'm based out of Toronto, but work with people all over the world. And the other part of my time, I teach. I teach a functional nutrition certification program, which we have a number of courses exploring different systems of the body and how to use food and supplements for healing and lifestyle interventions. And I really couldn't do one without the other. I couldn't spend all my time teaching, and I love teaching, but I couldn't spend all my time in the clinic either. Working with clients, it's a perfect balance of the teaching and the clinical hours. So that's how I got to where I am today.
I love that you said the perfect balance between teaching and your clinical hours because I really feel like one feeds the other. You know, when you get into the classroom, there's something that happens, something magical happens when you teach. You begin to make all the connections of everything you've been doing in the clinic, and then when you get into the clinic, you start going, "Oh, I can't wait to teach this." So
Yeah,
it keeps you on your toes, or it keeps you learning because you want to keep growing and learning in the field. I think one of the healthiest things we can do to grow, especially as healers, is to teach because that helps us to continue to strive to learn and want to be the best for the client and also for all the practitioners.
absolutely. I mean, and that's what's always driven me. Every time I learn a new lesson with a client, or I learn even something from a course that I do, or an article I read, my drive, my deep desire is to want to share that with other people, whether it's with my clients, or with my students.
Very cool. Now, you mentioned soil health and its direct relation to human health, which, once you put it that way, makes total sense. But so many people are completely disconnected from the farm. You know, we're disconnected from where our food comes from. Can you point out some examples as to why or what's going on in the soil that has led to our ill health?
Well, we're just depleting the soil terribly over the years through use of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, larvicides, conventional farming. I mean, our soil, we are made out of soil, air, sun, water, and our food is our sustenance, right? It's nature's ability, or it's nature's way of taking the power of all those elements, putting it in a package that we call food, and giving it to us so that we can convert it into human, essentially. And we need healthy soil in order to do that because that's where our food derives all of its nutrition from. So when we have conventional food, those plants are given a lot of help. Their soil's depleted to begin with, and because of that, they're more susceptible to disease and infestation and whatnot because they haven't pulled up those nutrients from the soil to protect them. Actually, a lot of what we call phytonutrients, which we see in all those beautiful colors of the rainbow, are natural pesticides and herbicides and fungicides for the plant. And because those plants can't actually protect themselves properly, farmers need to use copious amounts of chemicals in order to fend off disease and pests and whatnot for that plant, because it has to do it somehow or so that plant won't survive, and that all ends up in the soil as well and then goes systemic into the plant. So we're just not consuming this nutritious food anymore as it was 100 years ago. There's been a huge surge in organic, but guess what, people? Food was organic everywhere 100 years ago. So if we're not eating strong plants and strong food, we're not going to become strong ourselves.
How do we guarantee that we can eat strong plants and strong food? Is it just all organic food safe, or is there something to look for when buying our organic food? Or should we um, develop a relationship with the source, with the farmer?
It's a great question. And as I mentioned, organic food was all food 100 years ago. So when we're choosing organic today, that is really the bare minimum. It's interesting because when I started out in this field, over 10 years ago, and I started consulting with my clients, one of the things I debated about was, should we start with talking about organic food, or is that too much for them to swallow in the first appointment? And it was less known back then. People didn't even know what organic was. Now it's everywhere. So when I say it's the bare minimum, you know, our genes were built on organic food, on real food. We're 2.6 million years old, and for Homo sapiens to have developed and evolved to the place where we are today, we needed non-depleted food that was actually mostly wild. So when I say organic is the bare minimum, if you think about being at a baseline for optimal health, we kind of have organic. And then if we start to deplete the food and have processed foods and conventional foods, you kind of go below that and you get into the red. You can think about like a balance sheet for a business. And then you're already in deficit and you can't actually maintain your bodily systems properly eating those depleted foods. Now, if we think about how to even take it to the next step, for those of you who are interested in optimizing your health, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, usually people interested in growing and optimizing their health listen to these types of podcasts, we can think about, okay, now that we're getting organic, what are the best organic foods? And then we can look at foods in our grocery store that most resemble the original food. So there's a fantastic book out there entitled Eating on the Wild Side by Jo Robinson. And what she talks about is she goes through every single food group and talks about what the most nutritious option is amongst that food group and where those foods actually came from. So a lot of people don't realize that the tomato that we see in the grocery store today actually originated at very high altitudes and was the size of a berry. But over the years, farmers have bred these foods to be sweeter, juicier, larger, and more usable by the end consumer, which would be humans in this case, at the cost of nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So another example would be lettuce. So, iceberg lettuce is probably where most people get their greens in North America. And it's just crunchy water. So the original lettuce is from it's called a wild lettuce. We have it growing all over here in Ontario. And if you go out and look at wild lettuce, it's a rugged lettuce. There aren't a lot of leaves. It would be extremely bitter. It is very powerful against the elements, so it survives in nature really easily. And you really can't consume a lot of it. So again, over the years, we took that lettuce and we bred it to be sweeter and to give us more of a crunchier flavor. And the bitter is where the medicine is. So wild lettuce is actually used in herbal medicine as an analgesic. If you kind of slice the leaf of the lettuce or the stem of wild lettuce, and you actually see this in some lettuces in the health food store as well, or the grocery store, it kind of exudes this white milky substance, and that's actually where the power is. That's where the analgesic properties are, and a lot of other effects too. When I say analgesic, I'm also referring to the anti-inflammatory effects. So we can also, if we want to take it to the next level, we look for these foods that most resemble their ancestors. And then we can actually look for wild foods. And it's a lot easier to find wild foods than people think, because there's some great sources. Even in our grocery store, you can get wild rice, you can get seaweeds. Those are two really great examples. And wild foods have to fend for themselves in nature. So they have to sequester those nutrients, sequester those phytochemicals that would actually protect it so it doesn't get killed by its environment. So that's where I would start in terms of our discussion on food, and we could talk about that one for hours.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very interesting to talk. You mentioned wild foods and how you're then consuming that wild foods immune system, or their version of an immune system. So farmed foods versus wild foods. The wild foods have so much more medicinal properties. What kind of benefits do you see when we include that in our diet? Is there certain things that you can point to and go, you increased the wild foods in your diet, and these are the results we saw because of it?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, antioxidants are a perfect example. So one of the common wild foods that we can get, especially around this time of year, they're everywhere here where I live here in Toronto at all the farmers markets and even just grocery stores and whatnot, are wild blueberries. So, conventional blueberries are a lot bigger, they're juicier, but they're not as tasty. And the wild blueberries are smaller, they pack more of a punch, and research shows that they have at least 3 times the amount of antioxidants per gram. Those antioxidants are powerful free radical scavengers. And how do we make free radicals? We make them just from regular metabolism. We make them when we're exposed to toxins. And if we don't quench those free radicals, they go around our body and they create damage. So, it's for those of you who don't know what a free radical is, it's exactly what it sounds like. These things float around and they're free and they're radical and they want to cause damage. So unless we put handcuffs on those free radicals, they're going to, do some damage to our body, and we need ways to quench those. And food is how we do that. So if I go and I eat a handful of wild blueberries, I have 3 times the capability to quench those free radicals as if I went and ate just a conventional handful of blueberries. And that's where the power is.
Very cool. Now, you touched upon that you also like to help your clients figure out what kind of supplements to be on. Is that directly related to the fact that our soil is so deplete that we're not getting our trace minerals, and then the plants that are grown in this depleted soil um, aren't as full of nutrition, which is it's common knowledge. But people can Google it and see that over the last 70 years, the amount of iron or vitamin C or all kinds of nutrients in plants, like carrots and tomatoes, has significantly decreased because the soil is so deplete. The plant's not getting what it needs, and we only give the plants NPK and fertilizer, where we need, so many more nutrients. So, what kind of supplements do you, and of course, I know everyone's a bio-individual and you'd want to, work with people on an individual basis. What are the supplements that you think everyone should consider for their health program?
Yeah, so we usually start with a base. We talk about this in one of our courses, Therapeutic Nutrition and Supplements in Practice, that most people can benefit from 4 supplements as a base. A multivitamin, a good high quality multivitamin, and that's something we go into great detail because not all multivitamins are created equal. A probiotic, a good essential fatty acid combination, and vitamin D.
I agree with you about the vitamin D for sure. Especially living in the north, we just do not see enough sun. Now,
Hmm.
even for those in the south, do you think everyone should be on a vitamin D just because of our modern lifestyle? We're not getting enough sunlight even if we live closer to the equator, or do you think that if we get enough sunlight, we're good?
100% everyone should be taking vitamin D. The research shows that doesn't matter where you live, you're probably going to be deficient in vitamin D. Why is that? Because we're not outside all the time,
Mhm.
right? We're inside dwellers now. So, one example is I had a marathon runner who lived in California. I was outside all the time. We got her vitamin D levels tested as we do with all of our clients, and she was below normal,
Oh my
right? So
gosh.
we have 2 ranges. We look at the normal range and we look at the optimal range. And she wasn't even close to the optimal range. She was below normal and she was going outside every day. So due to various factors, you're going to be making vitamin D at different rates, and your metabolism of those vitamin D factors are going to be different as well. And we're all genetically different. So the only way to really check is through blood work. If someone with darker skin is in the sun, it could take up to 6 times the amount of time in order to make the same amount of vitamin D as someone with lighter skin. And then we all have different genetic susceptibilities or sometimes genetic, what are called SNPs or mutations that can affect the metabolism of that vitamin D as well. So everyone in the world is at risk of vitamin D deficiency. This has been shown in the research. There's a fantastic organization, Grassroots Health, that puts out a lot of research on this. So we all have to, check our blood levels. We don't have to guess, and then dose our vitamin D appropriately.
I did a really interesting interview a while ago with Dr. Heidi Samani, a naturopathic physician, about how we make vitamin D. And I thought it was fascinating that we need kidney health and liver health. And we have to make sure we have enough healthy fats in our diet to be able to make it. That it's not just, oh, anyone can hit sunlight and all of a sudden you're making vitamin D, that it requires or several organs and cofactors to make vitamin D. And so if we're missing one of those things, or exposure to sunlight and enough healthy fats and then optimal liver and kidney function, any of those things, we're not going to be making that optimal amount. So I like that you say that 100% of us should be on vitamin D. I've never met anyone who tested above average for needing their vitamin D. So it's pretty amazing that we're all walking around so vitamin D deficient. What are the symptoms that we should be looking for, or is it when you have symptoms, is it too late?
Well, that's a great question, and we can talk about. Well, I can answer this by sort of addressing all nutrients, because there's a continuum of what actually happens to the body to be able to appreciate a nutrient deficiency. So if we think about someone who might have, we're going to look at the two ends of the spectrum. So someone with sufficiency, they have optimal vitamin D levels. We expect that they wouldn't have any symptoms associated with vitamin D deficiency because they have enough, and all of the systems that use that nutrient are running smoothly. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, an example I like to use is scurvy, right? And vitamin C. So at the other end of the spectrum, we could also talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D, it's rickets. We have a scant nutrient deficiency disease. When your teeth are falling out and your wounds aren't healing and you're bleeding and you can't stop the bleeding and your connective tissue can't regrow properly, you're going to be diagnosed with scurvy. And what is that? That's just a vitamin C deficiency. But if we look at the two ends of the spectrum between the sufficiency, when someone has no symptoms, and when they have the disease, there's a big space in the middle. And in order to determine where you are on that space takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of detective work. Because what we have are somewhat under the radar symptoms. So there's a couple ways to assess where you are on that spectrum. One is through symptomatology, and that's actually the course that I taught when I was a teacher at my school, how to listen to the body to figure out what's going on. And other ways through some testing. So there's some labs these days that actually can test for nutrient deficiency, to see if you're completely deficient or even borderline deficient. And when you're in that middle ground, your teeth aren't necessarily falling out, your gums aren't necessarily, falling apart and bleeding, but you might have other symptoms, right? So we know that vitamin C is important for fueling adrenal hormone production. So maybe when you're stressed, it's a little bit more impactful than someone who might have enough vitamin C to spare in their body to support those hormone pathways. We know that vitamin C is critical for collagen formation. So that's kind of why you get all the symptoms with scurvy. But we also need collagen, to repair our tissue, for muscle repair after a workout. We need it to prevent stretch marks, things like that. So we're looking for these little signs. People's blood vessels get a lot weaker when they don't have enough vitamin C. So they get things like spider veins, varicose veins, hemorrhoids are pretty common. You can look in the whites of the eyes and you can see bloodshot eyes a lot easier for people who are vitamin C deficient. Vitamin C is also important for mental health. It's important for antioxidant protection. So we get these subtle symptoms. And I always say that symptoms are actually the language of the body, So I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking English today and you're understanding me, and I'm sure your listeners are understanding me. But the body speaks the language of symptom. So we need to understand what that language is so we don't get to a point where the body is trying to yell at us, right? And that's what this middle ground is all about. So with vitamin D, back to our discussion a moment ago, um, the disease is rickets, right? When you're vitamin D deficient. And in order to get rickets, you need to be like in the range of like 5 nanomoles per liter to like 50 nanomoles, along with some other factors. But when you're that low, you're not even close to optimal. We know that if you want protection from pretty much every type of cancer, you need to be well above 125 nanomoles. So, cancer, you don't, sometimes you don't really get symptoms before you're diagnosed, right? One day comes, you feel a little lump in the side of your body and you go to the doctor and you say, "What's that?" And they do a scan and they figure out it's cancer. And then you say, "Well, I didn't really feel any symptoms before that." And that's because sometimes you don't have these very easy to notice symptoms before you actually get to that point.
I think a lot of people, it happens so slowly over time. We tend to just kind of put our blinders on. It's like, oh, I feel tired. I'm going to drink an extra coffee. We tend to go for those band-aids, and we don't realize that we're now needing 3 coffees or 4 coffees to keep ourselves functional. And that the lack of energy was the body screaming out, was the body's symptoms speaking to us saying, hey, I have a deficiency and things are breaking on the inside and I need you to fill me up, like you're driving your car around with low oil. And we've got to learn to listen to those very subtle symptoms and fill up our nutrient tanks, fill up our oil tank, so that we don't one day wake up with that lump and realize that we spent the last 8 years creating an environment perfect for cancer, um, because it's so subtle.
Absolutely. And the analogy I use with my clients, we actually have something in our clinic here. I show it to every client. It's called the slope of health, and I actually teach it in every class. And it's to show people that you're either moving towards health or away from it. There's nothing called like stagnation. There's no such thing as stagnation. You go into a forest and everything's either growing or dying. Nothing's the same every time you go back to that spot in the forest. But people forget that our body is a piece of nature. So, are you putting health dollars in your health account, or are you taking them out? So I use the analogy of a health bank account, to kind of illustrate that point. And that when you're in the red, when you're in debt, that's when you experience symptoms. When you're in the black, you're not necessarily experiencing symptoms, but you could be close to it, or you could be, moving in the wrong direction. So if you have $5 in your bank account, you're not in debt. But if you have $1,000 in your bank account, you're also not in debt, but you have a much bigger window to spend that money. So, sometimes I have clients who come to me with pretty severe symptoms or diseases that have been diagnosed, and we start them on the protocol. Their symptoms improve, and then they say, "Josh, I'm feeling a lot better. Can I start to eat gluten again? Can I start to have sugar again? Can I start to have my coffee again? Can I start to, whatever X is?" And I say, "Well, you've been in the red, you've been in debt for I don't know how many years. We just got you into the black, and now you have $1 in your bank account. You're not quite in the clear yet. You're still in the yellow zone. We need to get your dollars up to thousands and thousands and thousands. So although you're not feeling that symptom, you're just on the other side of feeling that symptom. We still need to build up the resilience in your body. And that
Mm-hmm.
takes time. You know, each organ and gland and cell in our body has about 4 to 7 times the capacity of what it needs to run its systems, right? We have some redundancy in the body. If someone becomes an alcoholic, um, it takes years for that liver to get destroyed, years of abuse.
It's amazing.
Um, a diabetic, has to have high blood sugar in order to get diabetic neuropathy. It takes years, right? So the body has some resilience, And then it works both ways. So we can break down that resilience until we get to a point of dysfunction, a point of pathology where we can actually give those symptoms a name. And we can also go the other way when we're building health. That's the good news, right? We can build resilience. It's not just about getting to a point where we don't have symptoms, it's about getting to a point where we can build this resilience to an environment that's getting increasingly and increasingly hard to thrive in, really.
Mm. I love that how we've painted the picture so far to really understand that we need to fill our body's nutrient tanks. We need to look at where our food comes from. We need to understand that the quality of our food depends on the quality of the soil. And that is one of the main reasons why to eat organic. And now let's talk about stress. What is stress doing to us? Because we have emotional stress, mental stress, we have the physical stress of maybe being malnourished, spiritual stress, energetic stress, internal and external stress. So we've got all this stress going on. Um, how can we get it under control? And is there something we can do preventively? And why is it so important to manage our stress?
Ashley, I love how you qualified all those different types of stressors. Because what's so important to understand is that all stress is registered in the body in the same way.
Mm,
It all fires up the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, also known as the HPA axis. And your body can't tell the difference between mental, emotional, spiritual, chemical, all those ones that you mentioned in terms of stress. So it's really important that we have a system in place in order to be able to process that stress. You know, a lot of people use the word stress management, but sometimes you can't manage all the stressors that are coming in. It's about processing them and moving them through the body appropriately. And you know, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. We have to appreciate that stress actually has somewhat of a hormetic effect. In other words, a small dose can be good. So I'll give you some examples. You know, exercise is a stress to the body. A little bit is good, too much is bad, right? If you can recover from your exercise, then you're on the right track, and then you get stronger the next time. A lot of those phytonutrients I was talking about, like in the blueberries, actually work by stressing the body a little bit in these like microscopic ways, in these very minute ways, which allows the body to get stronger. It turns on all these enzymatic pathways, which are powerful antioxidant pathways. But it's when we have too much of a lot of what we consider, you know, the typical stressors, where it overloads our system. And that's why stress processing techniques, moving the stress through the body, is such an important thing for us to do. There's a fantastic researcher by the name of Candace Pert. She actually discovered the opiate receptor. And she wrote a book called The Molecules of Emotion.
mm,
And what she said is that our feelings, our perceptions of the world create this mixture of peptides that travel through the body and your brain, and they literally change the chemistry of every cell in the body. So, you know, when we see something that's fear-provoking, it creates a chemical response in the body that affects all of our cells. And typically, that's creating the fight or flight response and creates more of a catabolic state, a breaking down state, where when we see things that represent love and compassion and gratitude, we release a whole different set of chemicals that help to build our cells. You know, a really great chemical, which most people can access in an instant, is oxytocin. You know, if you go and hug someone, you release this wonderful chemical called oxytocin, which is really, really fantastic for the body. So we need certain processes in the body to move through some of those fight or flight chemicals, the adrenaline, the noradrenaline, the cortisol. And there's so many great ones out there, like yoga. One of my theories is that yoga has just exploded because there's been a huge need for it, right?
Mhm.
Because people are so stressed, they're looking for these things, and the demand is really there. So yoga is a fantastic way to kind of move these things through the body. I think most people have had the experience where they need to get something off their shoulders. I mean, we use that phrase all the time. There's something on your mind. And when you tell a friend or you tell, someone you're close to this piece of information, or share your feelings with them, you actually feel better afterwards. And that's what I'm talking about with stress processing. You usually feel better afterwards, having done that activity, whatever it might be.
So going for a walk, if they feel better afterwards, then that was a good activity to reduce stress.
Absolutely. And the sicker an individual is, the more restorative it has to be. So, some of the clients that come see me are so sick that if they go and they try to exercise, they feel worse off afterwards.
Mhm.
It takes them days to recover. So, people like that need to start very, very slow with maybe a light walk, would be an example. We do a lot of breathing exercises. So, doing deep breathing for 5 minutes a day is a great place to start for people. Um, and for people who aren't as sick, they can stress the body a little bit more. They can do, weights. They can, do, bike rides and swimming and skiing and activities like that. And if people are in really good shape, they can do heavy weightlifting. They can do CrossFit. So, there's the spectrum. Exercise is like a drug. It needs to be prescribed in the right dosage for the right person at the right time for the right duration. And when it's used that way, it can be very powerful.
I love that you said that because I think so many people on their health journey beat themselves up. Like they go to the gym and then they're comparing themselves wherever they are, if they just started their routine or maybe they're a month into the routine. I think a lot of people have that internal talk of that whatever they're doing, they should be doing something more. They're shooting themselves. They're shooting all over themselves. They should be doing it longer or more often or more weights. And I love that you pointed out that exercise is a medication, it should be a prescription. So you need 3 times a week for 30 minutes, but someone else might need 5 minutes twice a day. It just depends on where they are, and to use it as a point of healing for restoration, and to let go of that self-talk, because that self-talk in and of itself is also a stressor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have this completely warped idea of what health is. We think health is those people on the front of those magazines. Let me tell you a quick story. I have a good friend. Her name is Jillian Mandich. She's actually working on her PhD in the field of happiness, which is really cool. But I was on a panel with her recently at the CanFit Pro conference here in Toronto, and she shared a really interesting story. So a number of years ago, I believe it was in 2013, she was doing like a fitness model competition. Um, and she ended up winning the competition, and she was on the cover of one of those fitness magazines as part of the reward. The day that she did that photo shoot, she told us that she couldn't even do a push-up. She was so depleted and so physically weak and sick that after she won that competition, she decided she would never ever do that again. And it completely changed the way she looked at fitness. So, again, people are getting a false message as to what fitness is. Um, you have to use it in the right way. And when you do, it can be an extremely powerful tool for health.
I would love to interview her.
You absolutely should, and I can make the connection if you
Oh,
would like.
that would be great. Very cool. It's so interesting. just how much goes into this stress. Stress used to be very but like helpful when we were surviving, as hunter gatherers, right? And now, for some reason, we've really kind of come away from holistic health. We used to do it naturally, like you said. We've been around for however many millions of years, and we kind of figured out how to survive and how to live and thrive and be healthy. And something has completely disconnected where the last, I don't know, maybe it's 100 years, maybe ever since allopathic medicine came along, where we've disconnected from our own ability to advocate for our health. And a lot of people just wait to get sick, go to a doctor and get a drug. And like you said, we have a warped sense of what health is. Can you paint that picture so that we can begin to um, throw away some limiting decisions or negative beliefs that we've conjured about what health is, and begin to create a new healthy belief and vision for what our health should be?
Yeah, absolutely. And to begin that conversation, we need to look at where we came from. And indigenous cultures and indigenous tribes spend at the most 5 hours working throughout the day, hunting, gathering, making baskets, doing things like that. What do they do the rest of the day? They spend time with their family. They play. Imagine having a 5-hour workday. I can't even imagine it at the at the moment. I would love that, but that leaves another, if my math is correct, 19 hours to do everything else we need to do. And that's again how our genes were built. We'd go out, we'd do the hunt, we'd bring back the food, we'd eat the food with our family. It would all take a number of hours, and then we just hang out. So, today we just have that overstimulation, and with the modernization of our world, and technology and everything, it has pulled us further away from nature. So we have to find that happy balance. We can't all just go out and live in the woods again, because there are great things about technology, but we also can't succumb 100% to all of the conveniences of modern technology and modern living. And some of the ways that one of the ways I tell my clients they can try to find balance is to get back to nature as much as possible. Go for a hike, go for a walk in the park. We now know that plants actually exude these things called aerosols, which are these airborne, chemical cocktails that help to relax our nervous system, that help to put us into more of that parasympathetic mode where we're in rest and digest mode. So any way we can get back to nature is a great way to do it, and just getting back to our roots. So again, you sort of have to rethink every aspect of your life. And when I got into this field, that's what I started to do. So start with your food. What was the natural food that we ate? Well, first of all, it was all organic. Secondly, it was pretty much all wild, right? Rarely cultivated. So those are a couple good places to start. And then think about how our ancestors moved. So our ancestors would never run for an hour straight, you know? At
Unless we're being
most,
chased by a bear.
even still, it was a sprint, and they either got away or they died. And they got away more than they didn't, or else we would be here today. So we did primal movements like push, pull, throw, lunge, run, for example. So start moving that way. And there's wonderful experts out there talking about everything I'm talking about too, in a lot more detail. So move the way we used to, eat the way we used to, and then sort of live the way we used to. Get outside, breathe fresh air, drink clean water, and we all have these intuitive abilities within us to know what the body needs and to know how to get back to where we came from.
It's so interesting about the aerosols that the plants are putting off, because every time my husband and I go for a hike, he says to me, I can't believe how good I feel around these trees. Like, I just, because we go for this amazing hike in the woods in the Pacific Northwest, and it's just so majestic, and we just feel so charged up. And, we've gone on these hikes where we ended up going for 2 hours straight. And I felt like I could keep going. Like it was just, because we're not running, we're like walking at a strong, fast pace, up and down steep hills and in these, narrow paths in the woods with these big, beautiful trees. And if I were to be doing the exact same activity in the city, on the sidewalk, I would not have wanted to have done that for 2 hours. And
Oh, absolutely.
it's just
Yeah.
amazing. The quality of that experience going and finding a park or finding, a forest where you can hike, there's nothing compares to it. It feels so good. There's no drug that would make me feel as good as that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, here in Toronto, actually, I was reading a book. I'm just going to, I'll tie it back in a moment, but I was reading a book. I believe it was called Living the Simple Life. I read it a few years ago. And it was just all these kind of like little anecdotes that this author has, come across over her years. Um, and one of the things that she did, this author, I forget her expertise, but she created a garden right here in Toronto. Like this we have a Center for Mental Health right near where I live, and she designed a garden there with plants special to exude certain aerosols to help with mental health.
Oh my
I mean, how
gosh.
cool is that? That's like next level medicine right there.
Mhm.
That just takes it right back, using the wisdom of nature to access um, the natural form of the human body, to treat people with severe mental health issues. So, the power of the natural world is just way beyond what we can actually understand, I think.
Mhm. So, besides the regular, like everyone should try yoga and deep breathing and definitely getting out in nature and walking, um, what other ways can we incorporate stress management? Should we do stress management on a daily basis or just when we start to feel stressed out? Or should it be like, you take your supplements, you eat organic, and you do your stress management every day?
You have to do it every day. And we are all, processing stress in some way. It's just that some of us are doing it in constructive ways and some of us are doing it in destructive ways. So, constructive ways are ways that leave us feeling stronger after, like the meditation and the yoga and the light exercise we were talking about. Destructive ways are ways that leave you feeling weaker after. Maybe you don't feel it acutely, but it does deplete you. And some example of those are drinking alcohol, watching TV, um, doing drugs. Here in Toronto, marijuana is about to be legalized. And if you're resorting to a drug for stress management, you're losing the opportunity to do it, naturally and to tune up your nervous system to be able to process that stress. So, anything, and there's so many ways to do it, and it's different for everyone, but everyone needs some sort of stress processing practice daily. And by the time you get to a point where a pathology has presented itself, where there's a disease, there's a diagnosis, a naming of a group of symptoms, something has already been going on for a long time, right? So we're talking about prevention here, right? Most of my clients that come to me are presenting with a diagnosis, which is unfortunate. We need to begin putting these into practice years before they even have a chance to manifest. No one ever really taught us in school how to do stress processing. It's not in the curriculum. At least where I live, it wasn't in the curriculum.
Mm-mm.
We had phys ed class, but that's about as far as it went. So, um, as adults, people are becoming more and more aware that meditation, for example, as one form of this, can present with some really powerful effects on the human nervous system. And one caveat to say here, or one sort of note to add, is that a lot of these activities, like meditation, are not super sexy, right? Like you don't finish a session, you're like, oh yeah, like that was amazing. I feel fantastic. Like a lot of meditation sessions actually feel like work. And this is, again, what I explain to my clients a lot, because one of the most common things people come back and tell me is, I tried meditating, I'm a bad meditator. And, meditation and tuning up that part of the nervous system is a skill. It's a muscle, right?
Hmm.
Like if we all just stopped trying to walk the first few times we fell down, we'd all be in wheelchairs and it'd be a big mess. But it's the same with meditation. We have to actually tune up that part of the nervous system and make more neural connections. This is actually something we talk about in my mental health and neurology course, that you're actually increasing neurochemicals like brain-derived neurotrophic factor with meditation that that causes your nervous system to grow. And you can't do that in a day. You can't do that in a week. It takes, practice over time. That's why, Buddhist monks are, meditating like their whole life for hours and hours every single day to get to where they are, because it takes practice.
Hmm. A really good friend of mine, I've had him on the show. His name's Forrest Knudsen. He is the author of the book Hacking the Universe, and he has been a yogi for 20 years. He used to be a monk living in a monastery, and he figured out a way of meditating that utilizes the biofeedback system of the body, and he teaches it to complete beginners, and they have a very successful experience because they're focusing on their breath as a biofeedback device, and that allows them to kind of like keep their head at calm. And I know I'm not doing it justice explaining his system, but I highly recommend you checking it out, because he's figured something out that he was able to take some people off the street who've never meditated, teach it to them, and he had some of his monk friends see it, and they got upset because they said, we've been working at this our whole life, and you just got the same results from these people up the street that we've spent our entire life meditating every day to get. So
Right.
that was
Love
really
it.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I like this idea that we're figuring out more about marrying the holistic and the science, right? Marrying like how the neurology works, how the biofeedback works, how this all comes in, and then figuring out how to then take these ancient processes like meditation, to kind of become even better at it, more efficient at it. But you're right. Like if we sit down and meditate, it's like a lot of work because the thoughts pop into our mind. Then we go, oh crap! Now I'm thinking. I'm not supposed to be thinking. What am I doing thinking? I gotta focus on my breath. And so we have to just do it every day and build that muscle. It's so cool for you to point out that it actually, our brain is growing, our brain is making neural connections, and that is so healthy, and we're slowly over time creating new strategies at an unconscious level. What I've heard from people who meditate every day is that the once if you do it enough every day, so like you said, 5 minutes a day, if you do that enough days in a row, your body has developed a strategy so that when you enter into a stressful situation, you have this mindfulness, you have this peace about you, and that's because you spent all that time developing those neural pathways. Arnold Schwarzenegger spent a considerable amount of time. I mean, it was about 10 years where he meditated a lot, and then he stopped, and that was decades ago. And he said that to this day, he still gains the benefits from that intense meditative work that he did for 10 years, decades ago. So it was cool that he says it still has lasted in his neurology.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like an experience. A terrible experience can stick with you for life, and an amazing experience can stick with you for life. And that's when we have really strong neural connections. But going back on, some of, what your friend discovered with meditation on how to use breathing as biofeedback, that's incredible. I'll have to look into that.
Hmm.
But, there's also some great technologies that have come out that do very similar things. So, they say with our environmental crisis, technology got us there, and technology can get us out. With the human environmental crisis of what's going on in our minds, a lot of the time technology got us there, and there's some great technologies that can get us out. There's something called Inner Balance, which comes out of the Institute for Heart Math. And it basically looks at heart rate variability, which is a function of where our autonomic nervous system is. And it gives you biofeedback in real time, whether you're moving more towards the fight or flight response or the rest and digest response. And that just plugs into any iPhone. So that's something I recommend quite a bit. And there's another one called Muse, Muse, which has become really popular. So yeah, there's some really great technologies out there that can help people tap into this meditative state a lot quicker. And I'll definitely have to look into the one you mentioned as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think you'd love it. Now, you obviously have been teaching your clients for many years to meditate. Can you share some stories of success, kind of like that before and after picture, after your clients not only started a meditative practice because of your recommendation, but also obviously all of your recommendations? Can you share some of their stories of success with us?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I hear from people who start these types of protocols is that they can just handle stress better, right? They come back to me and they usually tell me a story or a specific event that happened in their life. And they say, typically I would react this way, but this time I reacted this way. It felt a lot better and I bounced back a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we're dealing with sort of somewhat abstract concepts here, but it ends up getting reflected in just people's day-to-day quality of life and how they feel and what their relationships are like, and how they process the world and how they feel at the end of the day. And that all, when that happens day after day, it's like compounding interest,
Mm-hmm.
compounding health interest, where it just builds on itself and allows you to really get more and more out of life.
It's kind of like we're going from the monkey brain to the more stoic, um, logic centers part of the brain, right? Because what's interesting about the stress response is when we have that fight or flight, sympathetic autonomic nervous system response, like you said, the axis of the hypothalamus, adrenal pituitary axis, um, the body shunts blood away from the logic centers of the brain. And
Hmm.
so, and what we don't understand is like, do not make life decisions in a crisis. Don't, like, if you just got diagnosed with cancer, don't make any decisions that day. Like, you need to go
Hmm.
and like hug a bunch of your friends and get some of that oxytocin back up. Get yourself, go like hug your dog or something. Get yourself out of stress mode. Go for a walk, breathe, and then take a few days and figure out when you're back into like not being in stress mode. That's when your brain gets turned back on. And we don't realize it, that in stress mode we're not thinking with the logic centers of our brain. And so it's so beneficial, because imagine if the listeners who are entrepreneurs, who their entire family relies on them running a business successfully, will make bad business decisions if we're coming from fear mode, if we're coming from stress mode. So it's not only affecting our health, it could affect the livelihood of our whole family. And so by doing what you say, meditating every day, for example, going for walks, obviously nourishing the body with healthy foods, but managing our stress on a day-to-day basis and building that muscle, will be so much more equipped to think clearly and to get back into center, and to make sure that we're coming from the logic centers of our brain, instead of that monkey brain, that fight or flight brain, when we're being hit by that stress. Now, you mentioned earlier that there's certain things that we weren't taught in school, like in our curriculum. If you were called up right now, let's say by, I'm making this up, the Canadian Board of Education, and they said, could we want
Hmm.
you to add some stuff to the curriculum, so the high school or the grade school curriculum, what would the biggest lessons be that you'd want to make sure that we all learn while growing up and into our adulthood?
I think I would show the kids a picture of a tree and take, or even just take them right into a forest and use that as a model to explain what health is. If you go out on the street and ask people what health is, you're going to get radically different answers. And if we want to reach this destination called health, I think we've all put in a destination into Google Maps. You're going to get a very inaccurate map if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going. So most people sort of know where they are, but if you don't know where you're going, you can't actually create a path. So I would define what health is by showing them the slope of health, showing them that it's a continuum. You're either moving towards health or you're moving away from health. And every decision that you make is causing you to move in one of those directions. Everything you eat, everything you drink, every relationship you have, every physical thing you choose to do is moving you towards or away from it. And then we would look at all of those things that nourish that tree in nature, right? To get it moving towards growth and health. Now, all those things that nourish the human body, the holistic perspective, the mental, emotional, spiritual, the food, that help to constantly usher us up that slope of health and keep us on the healthy side of things. And as per our discussion today on stress processing, that would be an example of one thing that we would teach the students at a very young age. How to develop skills. We develop math skills, we develop writing skills. What if everyone had the skill to process stress properly? And there's lots of other areas where we could probably use some education, like how to manage our money, which would help the stress processing. No one ever taught us that. So it's about a lot of it is about body awareness, and getting people to look within instead of looking without.
That's beautiful. Look within instead of look without. I love that. I was actually just looking into recently all the research about happiness. And what was really interesting is that 50% of our happiness comes from our day-to-day choices, like what we get to control. Because, there's so much we can't control. And in North America, particularly in the United States, the number one thing that people go to give them that sense of control and happiness, which adds up to about 50% of their daily happiness, was shopping.
Mm,
And talk about that looking without. Oh, I don't have the latest Kindle. I don't have the latest iPhone. I don't have the car I want. I don't have the house I want. I don't have the clothing I want. I don't have the body I want. And it goes on and on and on. And we're always looking to consume, consume, consume. And that's like the ego kind of keeping us busy over here when we look within, we could build all these riches within, and then all of that chatter would go away, would melt away, because it's an illusion. And so
absolute.
I love that
Yeah.
you said that looking within instead of looking without, and is such a powerful mindset to come into your healing. The sense I'm getting from you is that when you work with your clients, and also as a teacher, because you do teach this process as well, is that it's so much more than just nutrition. You're really doing this on a holistic level, helping people to give them the most tools they need for mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and energetic health. So you're really looking at us as a whole. And of course, we want to make sure the body is healthy, but it doesn't matter how much vitamin C we have if we're absolutely miserable or stressed out to the max.
Hmm.
Our supplements are one aspect, and one very important aspect, or food is one very important aspect, but you're making sure that we have these other aspects. And I think that's really cool. And I'd like to know, what do you do on a daily basis to manage your stress levels?
Such a good question. Yeah. So in the morning, I love to do some type of exercise in the morning. I mean, first of all, I believe that's when it's best due to the circadian rhythms, because that's when our cortisol is at its highest. But um, one of my favorite effects of doing exercise in the morning is that it increases blood flow to the brain, increases brain perfusion. So then throughout the day, whatever you're choosing to do that day, you've got increased blood flow and your brain just operates at such a higher level. So I usually wake up, I'll have some sort of cleansing beverage, whatever's kind of in my kitchen at the time. Sometimes it's a juice, sometimes it's just straight up water. Sometimes it's, a greens powder that I might have. Sometimes it's just, lemon squeezed in some water. So I do that to kind of flush out the system. Then I'll do some sort of physical activity, whether it's weights. I recently had my first kid. So now, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. So, one of my favorite things to do these days is, because I take care of him in the morning, is to strap him to my body in a wrap and just go for a walk in the park. So, I do that pretty much every morning these past 3 months for about an hour. And then I just feel fantastic afterwards. I,
Mhm.
um, I journal in the morning at some point for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll have my breakfast, and then I'm off to do whatever activities I need to, that day, whether it's going to work or, spending time with the family or doing some sort of recreational activity. Um, and that kind of sets me in a fantastic state to really get the most out of my day.
Now, I know you're a pro at this, so this probably hasn't happened, but like just getting vulnerable for a sec, have you sort of like messed up or skipped your daily routine or something in the last 3 months or 6 months didn't work out and you didn't get to do your walk or get to do your exercise? And did you notice a difference?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Life happens. You listen to these podcasts and these experts, and you're like, oh my God, they're so perfect. But, it's impossible, to stick with that religiously. So, yeah, there's definitely days that it's missed. Some days there's just things happening, and you're like, okay, I got to get to my walk. I got to get to my exercise. I got to get to my meditation. And the day just keeps on getting later and later, and you miss it. And I absolutely 100% feel the difference, Um,
What's it feel
you know,
like?
you just don't feel as powerful, you don't feel as confident, you don't feel as energized, um, and you don't enter all the activities of the day with as much optimism as you typically would. And that's what I find happens.
Very cool. Do you have any hints for us who, if we've all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, it's noon and I never got to my morning routine, should we like, sneak, go to the bathroom stall and sneak in 5 minutes of meditation or some deep breathing? Or are there kind of like some recovery strategies that we could develop?
Yeah, well, you nailed it right there. Deep breathing is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. You can do it while you're working, you can do it while you're driving, you can do it while you're waiting for the bus, you can do it while you're preparing your lunch. And it's going to have profound impacts on the nervous system because our breathing is governed by both the conscious and the non conscious parts of our nervous system. So if we access it through consciousness, we can actually influence some of the unconscious parts of the autonomic nervous system. And that can help to clear cortisol, can help us to think better, can influence our heart rate variability, and just get us more in tune and online with stuff.
Can you clarify that for me? That was really fascinating. So I know that breathing is such an interesting thing where either we breathe us or our unconscious breathes us, breathes for us. And like, the unconscious beats our heart. We can't consciously take over beating our heart. So it's really cool how there's that one process we can take over breathing, or it just happens. If we forget about breathing, we don't just like pass out, right? Our unconscious mind takes over. But you said when we take over our breathing, it helps to also do some stuff in our unconscious mind. Can you kind of dive into that and give us some more details around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Science likes to make things black and white. So we call this part of our nervous system the autonomic nervous system, which kind of sounds like automatic because that's what science says it is. It's automatic, right? The beats of our heart are not controlled by us consciously. But we actually can control the beats of our heart consciously. It's not as easy as moving our arm or our finger or our mouth or saying words, that part of the nervous system. It takes a little bit more effort and training, but by changing the what type of information is coming into the nervous system, we can actually change a lot of these autonomic processes. And we know this from meditators. We know this from heart rate variability monitoring. You can actually put this device, what I was talking about earlier, on your earlobe. It monitors your heart rate frequency. And by the thoughts you have, you can actually see your heart rate change. You can see your breathing change. And when we access these parts of our nervous system, we kind of take over control. We say, hey, automatic nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, right? We say, hey, we're taking over control right now. We don't want you to just respond mindlessly to our environment, even though there's these stressors coming in. We want to influence it to, bring it into more of that rest and digest mode. And you do that through a lot of the activities we've spoken about, through that meditation, through the restorative yoga, through things like that, through the nature walks.
Very cool. Now, let's say someone eats the standard American diet, goes to McDonald's or something like that. Does that trigger the stress response? Does eating artificial food or food the body doesn't recognize as being food, food-like substances, does that also trigger the stress response?
Oh, absolutely. There's a study done where they gave participants sort of what a typical McDonald's meal would be like. I think it was like a Big Mac and a container of fries. And then they measured all sorts of blood levels, and inflammation skyrocketed for 5 hours after eating that one single meal. So, people say, oh, one meal won't hurt me. Well, yeah, it actually will, according to your blood chemistry. It's increasing inflammation, and inflammation is a fight or flight response, right? It's trying to deal with a threat that's occurring. Your immune system's on fire. It's firing up. So, yeah, it's actually, it can be done with, even very small acts.
Wow. So even going to your local organic grocery store and taking some deep breaths while you pick out some beautifully, organic produce and your wild caught whatever you can get, your wild caught. People are chasing down wild lettuce. Your wild picked greens if you can get them, or your blueberries or your wild rice, whatever. And you take some deep breaths while you're doing that, and you give gratitude and thanks, because that also is great anti-stress practice. And then
Hmm.
you sit down to eat your wild caught lettuce and and take some more deep breaths, and you eat that. You're not only nourishing the body, but you're also on several levels, like that energetic, spiritual, emotional, mental, physical. You're hitting all the de-stressors on all those different levels, right?
Absolutely. And I hate to be so doom and gloom for a moment, but it's necessary. And what I'm going to say is that in the world that we live today, the deck is stacked against us in a huge, huge way. Um, I mean, just the chemical world. I teach a whole course on detoxification and biotransformation, but we've introduced 80,000 chemicals into our environment over the past 100 years. Most have never even been evaluated for safety. So the toxic load that everyone's exposed to is just, it's beyond what you could even imagine. So we need to use every single tool in the toolbox to try to keep at the top of the slope of health and to keep us moving in the right direction. So, my clients often ask me, is one coffee okay? Is one Big Mac okay? Is, one dose of sugar okay? And I say, I'm not going to tell you if it's okay or if it's not okay. But what I'm going to say is that what you're going to eat and every decision you make either moves you towards health or away from it. So you need to decide how much of that expendable health income you have and whether it's worth it to move down the slope of health a little bit. Mark Hyman calls sugar a recreational food. You can use it occasionally for fun, but that's about it. So, I like how he describes that. So, that's how I portray it to my clients.
I love it. Recreational food. That's so funny. And it shouldn't be legal, but it is. can you paint for us? Because you did such a great job painting your daily practices for uh anti-stress. What's an average day look like in terms of your food? Can you share like what did you eat today and what did you eat yesterday? What is it? What does your plate look like?
Yeah. So, there's thousands of diets out there. They with all different perspectives on macronutrients and proteins and things like that. But the thing that they all agree on is vegetables, right? You don't have to convince anyone that vegetables are good. So I'm trying to consume as many vegetables as I can. They're nutrient dense options for food, and then I add my proteins and my fats in to balance those meals. So for breakfast, one of my favorite breakfasts from which I would feel fantastic is sautéing up some kale or spinach. And I love sautéing those greens up because like you can throw like a huge amount into the pan and then it
Mhm.
reduces down. Like you're getting a ton of nutrition there. Scrambling that up with some eggs, having that with some kimchi on the side, or sometimes I make like a homemade almond bread, and having that for breakfast. I like to make what I call elixirs. So I'll make these nice hot drinks with various herbs in them. I actually have a formula which I made called Elixir. Um, uh, and sometimes I put cacao in there, some adaptogenic herbs, some superfoods, and sometimes I just have straight up green tea. And that's usually my morning breakfast. For lunch I'll have usually leftovers. So dinner is usually some sort of protein, like a fish or chicken, like a wild caught fish or organic chicken, organic beef. Sometimes, I'm not strict. You might be getting the impression that I'm like strict paleo, so that's not the case. Sometimes I do have grains. I'll have like a gluten-free pasta. We'll have wild rice. We'll have quinoa. We'll have, Indian style food. So, my wife, Megan Telpner, has written 2 cookbooks. So she has a lot of fantastic recipes, and she actually runs an online cooking school. So we always have a lot of fancy and interesting things going on in the kitchen. We both love to cook, so it's a whole variety of things. We don't really stick to any specific discipline like paleo or vegan or vegetarianism. We're omnivores. We eat kind of what we feel like our body needs, and that's kind of taken some time to get that body awareness. But as long as it's whole foods, organic, and nutrient dense, it's fair game.
You're speaking my language. Now, have you ever had clients who could be healthy vegans? It's so controversial. And I know I agree with you that we are all bio individuals and not everyone there's not one diet that's perfect for everyone because your medicine might be my poison, right? Your wild rice is good for you, might not be good for me, might be good for someone else. And so we have to figure out what is really, really, really what resonates with us. Um, but there's this controversy around whether people can be healthy vegans because lack of the fat soluble vitamins, for example, in their diet, or the lack of the omega 3, for example. So, what do you say to vegans, or do you think that someone could be a healthy vegan?
Well, the people who come to my clinic are very unwell,
Mm,
and it is very, very difficult to get someone who is unwell to be well again if they are vegan. That has been my experience over and over and over again. So usually the way it goes down is we do the intake. We discover they're vegan or vegetarian. I ask them if there's any flexibility on it. And when there's no flexibility on it, I still work with them. I still give them a protocol, but we usually only get to a certain point. And then I sort of have to discuss and re-bring up the point that there might be certain nutrients we are only able to get through animal foods. Um, and we have that conversation at that point. So I have yet to work with someone or even know someone who's a healthy vegan.
so you didn't go into practice with a bias. You went in with neutral and you observed it through science and through the lab tests. that over and over again, that if someone was very sick, they needed the full spectrum of nutrients, including some healthy animal products, in order to get on the other side and like you said, put money in their health bank.
Absolutely. The other thing I say, on your point that you just made is, when someone does say that, I say, okay, if you're a vegan, that's fine. I respect that. It might be for spiritual reasons, might be for health reasons, but I don't give labels to any diets. Let's see what your body's telling us. So we do a blood panel, and we see, what their, different blood levels are like. Maybe we do like a micronutrient test, and we see, what their zinc levels are like, and what their iron's like, and what their B12 is like. And, if all those levels are in the toilet, it's pretty sheer and present evidence that their diet isn't working for them. You know, it takes a lot to liberate a lot of those nutrients out of vegetable sources, and that's, I think, something we can talk about in a whole other podcast.
Absolutely.
Um,
I'd love to have you back. This has been very eye-opening, I'm sure, for the listeners, and you are such a wealth of knowledge. So absolutely, you are definitely welcome back, and we can dive into these other topics for sure.
oh, for sure, that'd be my pleasure.
I want to make sure that we discuss your school because I find that so fascinating. So you not only are a functional nutrition specialist, but you also teach people. Do you certify people in becoming functional nutrition? Is it a counselor or a therapist or a coach?
Yeah, it's a certified functional nutrition coach. So it's where we put the pedal to the metal. A lot of what we're talking about today, we talk about how to apply it in a real life situation where you have another person in the flesh and blood across from you, and you need to make clinical decisions in order to get them up that slope of health. So it's one thing to understand things in theory, like from a textbook. It's another thing to have this dance with another human being, where we try things based on the evidence, we see how it works, and then we make changes. And we go through that in detail in my program, the Functional Nutrition Certification Program, um, looking at different body systems and also diving deep into the tools to bring these body systems back into balance. So there's 4 areas we're always looking at, and that is foundational diets, functional foods, lifestyle interventions, and therapeutic supplementation. So we explore all aspects of the body using those 4 items as our framework for how we would intervene in a situation.
Cool. And how long? Now, this is an online course, or do people visit you live?
This is 100% online. So people join us from all over the world. We have about 20 countries that join us so far for this program, and the information is available 24/7. So it's very accessible if people are interested in doing it. We do have live Q&As every week, which are also recorded if you can't make it live. And if people want more information on it, I'm not going to go into all the details here. They can go to functionalnutrition.ca, and they can get everything, all the information there.
Very cool. Functionalnutrition.ca. And of course, the link to that and everything that Josh does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. So you can definitely check it out there. How long is the course?
The course, we run 2 groups. So we start in September and we start in January. So when you're in the September group, it goes to about April, May. And when you're in the January group, it'll end in December because we do take the summers off.
Very cool. And what kind of can you give us paint us a picture of some of the testimonials of people who've gone through? So, is it just healthcare practitioners that should take this course, or can lay people who, just like the listeners who've don't have any background in health but are really interested in this? So, like, can anyone take it, or should only healthcare practitioners be take your certification program?
Yeah, so we open it up to both healthcare practitioners and health enthusiasts. So there is something for everyone. We actually have 3 different levels of the program. The first level is honorary for people who are just, maybe doing it for their own interest. It's our core curriculum. And then we have two more advanced levels, two certified levels. So a certified practitioner and an advanced certified practitioner, all up to, the top level. We go through case studies. We actually have one-on-one time where we, refine your skills and go through your personal case studies with your clients. So there's different levels depending on where you're at.
Very cool. And have you, obviously you're in communication with your graduates. Where do they end up working? Do they work in clinics and hospitals, or like what does it look like to be a graduate of yours?
Not hospitals. That's reserved for the dietitians, at least here in Canada. Maybe one day. But private practice, a lot are doing over online consulting. Um, some are working in health food stores or in clinics with other practitioners, multidisciplinary. It's, all over the place at the moment.
Very cool. Well, I believe wholeheartedly in health coaching, and uh it's so important. It's so important. It's so actually health coaching is the number one growing field in terms of the health, because there's a need for it, because there's such a strong need for someone to hold our hand and see our blind spots. And we might think we're eating healthy, but if we're not getting results, like you said, come back to the results. No matter where you are, if you have these symptoms of the body speaking to you, then your diet might not be giving you what you need. That's, we got to
Hmm.
come back to what is feeding us, right?
Hmm.
You're driving your car down the road and your car is not working. You may think you were giving it enough gas and enough oil, but if you have no gauges, you don't know, right? We have to kind of come back, and that's why sometimes speaking with an expert and kind of looking at our symptom panel, or looking at some blood tests and getting a it's like all of a sudden for the first time you can see the gauges on the dashboard of your car, and you realize that you've been
Mm.
running on low oil your whole life when you didn't think you were. How do
Hmm.
how do I know I'm getting enough vitamin C, or how do I know I'm getting enough selenium? How do I know I'm getting enough, calcium? The only way I would know is if I was listening to the symptoms of my body and all of a sudden I have osteoporosis. That's too late. We gotta back it up and handle it now before we have any symptoms, right? There's
Absolutely, 100%. And just to add to that, you mentioned health coaching, how important it is. It is the new medicine. Like, our healthcare system is moving in a terrible direction. We've got a mismatch of a system that treats acute illness trying to treat degenerative diseases, chronic illnesses. And that's creating a huge problem. And health coaching, functional nutrition, is the future of medicine. And it's happening now. It's happening right now. I'm teaching people how to do it. And we're seeing results that some people might call miracles, right? When you can heal the body and you haven't been taught that that's actually possible, you call it a miracle. But it's something that's happening every day in my clinic. It's something that's happening with my students as well. And that's because we're working with nature. We're working with the way the body is supposed to work, getting to the root cause, getting upstream, and addressing that appropriately.
wonderful. Now, if someone's been listening to this and they would like to work with you personally, do you still take on clients, and they do it from anywhere around the world? Um can you be their health coach over Skype?
Yes, absolutely. So they can get in touch with me just by going to joshgitalis.com.
Okay, great.
Um,
And that's Josh, Josh, and then your last name is Gitalis.com.
that's correct.
Great. And of course, that is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast as well. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Definitely a wealth of information. I'd love to have you back. I'd love for you to continue sharing more and more with our audience. And I applaud you for the work you're doing, because you are turning people into health coaches, and those people are going and helping thousands of people. And it's just spreading like wildfire. The only way we're going to change this very corrupt system, and yes, it is corrupt, our medical system, both in Canada and in the United States, anywhere where pharmaceutical companies can control the government through lobbying, there's massive corruption. Just like big pharma, there's big agriculture, and if the government is subsidizing GMO crops, and then that cheap food is being put into our food, and we are given a choice. You can afford this crappy food that destroys your body and causes cancer and a bunch of other diseases and diabetes and obesity, or you can pay for real food and it's a bit more
Hmm.
expensive, but you're putting money into your into your health bank, and 10 years down the road you're not going to have diabetes and be obese and lose a limb, or
Hmm.
or be on 5 medications, and so we're giving these choices that are very hard, because there's so much corruption, and it's the grassroots movement of the podcasters, of the healthcare practitioners like yourself, of the health coaches, us coming together, spreading this information. That's what's going to move the needle. That's what's going to make the difference. So, for listeners who have been inspired by what Josh has shared today, please take this episode, share it with your friends and family. If you know someone who'd love to become a health coach or be interested in learning about functional nutrition, or someone who needs to decrease their stress, share this episode with them. Let's turn this ripple into a tidal wave. Let's, we need to be that force that tips that scale so that the corruption is no longer controlling our health and our wealth and our freedom and our happiness. So, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show today and enlightening us and helping us to live more holistically, and increase our happiness. Because I think when we decrease stress, it increases. It's a direct correlation to happiness. So you're also helping people have more happiness in their life.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it was my pleasure. And thank you for what you do too.
Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you can support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Or join our membership, learntruehealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to learntruehealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to learntruehealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. learntruehealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to learntruehealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.